we're delighted to have you here as we continue our mission to develop and connect leaders in this virtual space from far and wide. We'd like to recognize and acknowledge each of you and the organizations and the communities that you represent. So please take a moment to find the chat and type the name of your organization and your location in the chat right now. And as we see the names of your organizations pop up and the various regions and communities you serve, we celebrate you. As nonprofits, we know that our partners and membership organizations can oftentimes elevate our voices and our missions. As a member of the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, our NLC team knows this firsthand, that FNA exists to be the state's collective voice, respected advocate, effective connector, and powerful mobilizer for our nonprofit sector. For this engaging session today, we'll focus on the reality of our strength in numbers, the economic impact of our Tampa Bay nonprofits. We are delighted to be joined today by Leah McDermott, the program manager of the Florida Nonprofit Alliance. Leah has been working and volunteering in the nonprofit sector for more than 20 years now. She specializes in helping organizations grow their capacity to meet the mission through training, leadership development, strategic thinking and planning, research and processes, and procedures implementation. Leah conducts and facilitates training on various topics of importance, including board governance and engagement, advocacy, starting a nonprofit organization, and trends like these in our sector. She has served on boards for organizations in various locations worldwide. She has worked at the Nonprofit Leadership Center of Northeast Florida, the American Cancer Society, and the Alliance for World-Class Education, and many other nonprofits in a consulting capacity. Moderating our session today is my teammate, Karina Kletter, NLC's program associate. Karina, as many of you know, is an awesome driving force behind our work in providing an accessible virtual experience for our participants. She's passionate about our work and committed to respond as we place ourselves forward in our community. She will take us through some rules of the road for our time together today. Karina.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and welcome everybody. So just a few rules of the road for today's webinar. To minimize background noise and distractions, all lines will be muted for the duration of the webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available on our website in the next few days. We will also share the slide deck when we post the recording. You may have noticed that we have live captions enabled, which is a Zoom accessibility feature. If you find them distracting, or if you would like to see them but don't see them yet, you can enable or disable them by going to the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking on the icon that says CC Live Transcript. Once you click that, click the button that says Disable Auto Transcription or Enable Auto Transcription. We warmly welcome your questions. Please type them in the chat box as they come up for you, and we'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for Leah to answer as many as we're able to get to. If you haven't found the chat box yet, go to the settings at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on chat. And if you haven't already, please share the name of your organization in the chat box. We're so delighted to have Leah McDermott with us today. We look forward to a great informative webinar. On to you, Leah.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Really happy to be here. And we really appreciate the Nonprofit Leadership Center for inviting us and for the continued partnership that we have. As Charlie mentioned, the NLC are members of FNA, as are many of you. I was watching the organizations come through the chat, saw a lot of familiar names. So really happy to be here, and hope that we can give you a lot of great information in a fairly interactive format. For those of you who are not familiar with FNA, Charlie shared our mission statement earlier. We spend a lot of our time in the advocacy, public policy, and lobbying space. So unlike NLC, which is helping you all with all sorts of different things that you need in order to have an effective and efficient organization, we're really focused on how we make a difference at the policy level. So we do that in lots of ways, both advocating on behalf of the sector and also helping organizations understand how to advocate for themselves. So if you're curious more about what we do and our mission, I invite you to check out our website, flnonprofits.org. We are the statewide association for nonprofits in Florida, which also gives us a membership to the National Council of Nonprofits. That not only connects us to the boots on the ground lobbying in DC at the federal level, but it also connects us with the other 44 state associations around the country so that we can share all the great work happening in Florida and also learn from our counterparts. As I mentioned, several of you are members already. If you're not familiar, a little bit more about what we do. I mentioned our advocacy and public policy arm. We also do a decent amount of research, which is what we're talking about today. We have some great general tools on our website, like our legal compliance checklist. And we try to hold a pretty regular training calendar as well. All of our trainings are in that advocacy space. So if you're curious about that, once again, I invite you to check out our website, flnonprofits.org. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter, which you can do from the front page of our website. It's free, just comes out once a month, and it gives you a good taste of what it is that we are monitoring at the state and federal level and the types of information that we can share with you. So great. And with that, we're going to jump right in. Today, I'm here to tell you a little bit about our 2023 Economic Impact Report. We've been providing this economic impact data to the nonprofit sector in Florida since 2017. We released an update in 2020, and this year's update not only includes new information about Florida's nonprofit sector, but it also, for the first time, gives you a step-by-step guide on how to use this data specifically for your information. We really wanted to make sure that we could translate this down to each individual nonprofit organization being able to use this to boost your success, whether it be in fundraising and programs and advocacy, so that you could really better tell your story about the impact that you make in the community. This data is free for anyone to access, and it highlights nonprofits as both employers and as revenue producers. It describes the strength of the sector and helps us communicate some challenges that the nonprofit sector is facing. So we developed the Florida Nonprofit Economic Impact Report for two major reasons. First, we know that we can tell policymakers, funders, and other decision makers the data that shows the importance of the nonprofit sector to the local economy. So we have the numbers statewide, but we also can drill down to the county level and to regional level. Secondly, it provides evidence to nonprofit leaders, to all of you, and others who advocate on our behalf for investment in that work that we do. We are especially interested in how this research can help you increase your influence, your resources, and your connections. When you understand the contribution of the nonprofit sector, both in general and with a specific focus on your region and your work, you then have the data and stories to tell funders, policymakers, community leaders, and others that you might be interacting with. And you can see how your experience at your organization compares to the larger trends that are experienced by nonprofits all around you, and oftentimes give you that support and data that you might need in order to really successfully convey that to the people that you're interacting with. I do want to say a thank you to the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. They sponsored the research this year, so we really appreciate their support and the way that they uplift the sector across the state. This year, we added some additional functionality that we hope will increase your ability to tell that story of both need and success, right? We're looking at both sides of the story. Today, we're going to take a look at the information both for the state and for the Tampa Bay region. So that's going to include some highlights from the report, key messages that you can use as you talk about yourselves in the sector, an updated data dashboard, and the practical action guide that's brand new this year. And we're going to walk through how to use that to help you interpret the data. You can find all of those resources on our website, flnonprofits.org, under research and then economic impact. And Karina also will be sharing that link with you when you get the recording and the slides from today. And I do want to reiterate, I know Karina is very kindly monitoring the chat for questions. So as you think of things, I know sometimes when you see a lot of numbers come through and data come through, it's easy for the questions to fly out of your head. So please do drop those in the chat as you have them, and I'll be happy to answer as many as we can at the end today. All right, so let's jump in and look at some of the highlights. According to the Florida Chamber of Commerce, if Florida was a standalone country, we would be the 16th largest economy in the world, which is a really impressive statistic. And the really good news is that that would not be possible. Florida could not be as large or as successful of an economy without a strong, connected, and powerful nonprofit sector. And we're going to see why today. So that when people talk about how important the economy is, or how successful Florida is, or how well we're doing right now as an economic state, we have the ability to really talk about how the nonprofit sector contributes to that. So for this 2023 version of the report, we did make some slight alterations to the criteria from what we used in the past. This report this year doesn't include every single 501c organization. We focus on the charitable organizations, the 501c3s, and other tax-exempt organizations, the C4s, C5s, and C6s that are currently active and most likely to employ staff members, most likely to create revenue in the communities, and most likely to hold assets. So we are looking at organizations with $50,000 or greater in annual income. The data that we're using comes from several sources: the IRS's Exempt Organizations Business Master File, the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for the employment data, and the U.S. Census Bureau and U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics for the poverty and ATLAS numbers, which we'll get in just a minute. So from the state level, Florida has 22,710 nonprofit organizations. We're employing over 456,000 people annually, which equaled out to annual wages of $27.5 billion. The average annual wage in the state for a nonprofit employee is $60,323, which is slightly below the state average of $63,836. But we're close there, very close. Each year, we're generating $116.5 billion in revenue, and the sector holds assets valued at over $255 billion. So very significant numbers, right? When we talk about the success of our economy and whether nonprofits are important to it, you can see here how much we play into that. If you happen to compare these numbers to our 2020 report, they are going to look a little different. As I said, we changed the criteria this year on who we included as a nonprofit for this report. So it looks like a sharp decrease in the number of nonprofits, but that's really because of that change in criteria. If we can compare the same subset of data from 2020 to 2023, the number of nonprofits in our state actually increases about 5%, and the revenue increases about 21%. From $96 billion and some change in 2020 to $116.5 billion in 2023. In the Tampa Bay region, which for our report, the region is defined as Citrus, Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, Pinellas, Polk, and Sarasota counties, we're looking at just over 4,800 nonprofit organizations that meet that same criteria. Remember, this does leave out any of the all volunteer organizations in our state, which are vitally important to the sector, but aren't contributing the wages piece that we see with the economic impact. These organizations employ an average of 113,000 employees with more than $6 billion in annual wages, and they generate almost $27 billion in annual revenue. The region's current revenue is almost, let's talk about that. And that's a 22% increase since 2020. Nonprofits in the Tampa Bay region hold $66 billion in assets, which is an increase of 41% over 2020. And I know for the Nonprofit Leadership Center, the service area is slightly different. So the region as defined, in our report includes Citrus, Manatee, and Sarasota, which is not necessarily the primary target for the Nonprofit Leadership Center. So we have done a subset of the data to look at the 5 counties that are the priority for you all, and probably what most of you are covering, which is Pasco, Polk, Pinellas, Hernando, and Hillsborough. So anytime we talk about the 5-county area, those are the 5 counties that we're referring to. When we look at that subsect, the 5 counties have just over 3,500 nonprofit organizations employing 100,000 people, providing $6 billion in wages and $24 billion in revenue annually. Plus, we're holding assets in the community at almost $59 billion. So once again, no matter how you slice this data, when we talk about the effect that nonprofits have on the economy, it's significant. It's things that people should know about, things that decision makers should know about when they're talking about how to support nonprofits, and if they should, these numbers help to back up our importance to the success of the economy. Within that 5-county region, Hillsborough is the largest with the number of nonprofits, just over 1,400. Pinellas is second with just over 1,200 nonprofits. For a number of nonprofits across the state, you also see Hillsborough and Pinellas playing a big role in that. Hillsborough County is 5th in the number of nonprofits out of the 67 counties. Pinellas is 6th in number of nonprofits. Hillsborough is 2nd in employment and 2nd in revenue for the state. Pinellas is 5th in employment and 4th in revenue for the state. So those two counties in particular also have a big impact on the success of the state overall. You can find detail of each county on our website, but this gives you a quick glance at what the 5 counties look like. So as we move into some more detail, I do want to talk a little bit about what we think some of the takeaways are from this report this year. As I've mentioned a couple times already, that Florida's economy cannot be as successful or as large without the nonprofit sector's strength. We also want people to remember that we are an important employer for Floridians and for Tampa Bay residents across the board. This economic data can help your organization tell your story, which we believe will impact your advocacy and fundraising. It can also help you build connections and collaborations by helping you connect with other nonprofits in your region. I'll show you how to do that in just a few minutes. It can also help decision makers like elected officials better understand the sector. And the practical action guide, I think, will help your staff, your board members, your volunteers, maybe even your clients really understand what some of your own key messages might be. So let's take a look at some of those. Part of what we hope that you take away today is how your organization and your county fits into the overall picture of nonprofits in our state. This gives you an idea of what your nonprofit or your county does well to make sure that holds steady, or what might not quite be up to par that we would like to change. So keep that in mind as we look through the data today. We can take a look at the number of nonprofits by region. Like I said, for this report, the Tampa Bay region does include, I believe it's the 8 counties in the region. But when we take a look at that Southeast region, which has Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and 4 other Southeastern counties in it, has the most nonprofits, followed by your region, the Tampa Bay region, and then East Central region, which contains Orlando. Across the state, of the 22,000 plus nonprofits that we have, about 22% of them are religion in mission area, 21% fall into the human services category, 21% are public and societal benefits, which includes foundations, as well as civil rights and advocacy organizations, community improvement organizations, that type of thing. And education makes up about 10% of the statewide nonprofit, and that does include higher education there. When we look at the 5-county area, the subsector breakdown looks very similar to the states with a few exceptions. So for this 5-county area, religion nonprofits is actually much lower. For the state, it's 22%. For this region, only 6% of nonprofits are religion and mission area. Public and societal benefit is also slightly lower in your 5-county area, 17% versus the state, which is 21%. But human services are slightly higher, a few more of those. So 26% in the 5-county area versus 21% for the state. So take a minute and find out where your organization fits into this. Where does your mission area fall? And think about if there might be a story for you to tell with this particular data point. So for example, if you're a human services provider, maybe the story is, there's lots of us doing a lot of great work in different ways for different populations, but we also take the time to connect and collaborate with each other to solve problems, right? We can talk about that and kind of counteract the myths about there being too many nonprofits or us duplicating services in some way. But if you're an arts and culture organization, maybe the story is a little bit different. We're a small but mighty percentage, 5% of the nonprofits within the 5-county area, doing work across the entire county. We affect tourism, we affect education, we affect quality of life, but we make up a very small section of it. So we're doing a lot with little, right? So maybe that's the story that you need to tell. So think about that. Where do you fall? How does this fit into the bigger picture? And how might you strengthen your story with this information? Across the state, as we look at the subsectors, health has the largest total revenue and the highest percentage of employment, followed by education, which is the second highest in revenue with the third most employees, and then human services, which is third most revenue and second highest employment. So those three areas make up the vast majority of the nonprofits across the state. In the 5-county area, health has by far the largest total revenue and highest percentage of employment. That's followed by human services at the second for both revenue and employment, and then education for the third. So compared to the state, here, human services is second in revenue above education, which is what we see statewide. Compared to the state overall, education and human services employment is lower, about 6% lower for both. But the health employment is much higher. 64% of nonprofit employment in the 5-county area, it comes from health organizations compared to 46% for the state overall. So I think, that tells us that there's a high reliance on health nonprofits in the region to provide that employment. Maybe there's a message there about underinvestment in other areas, or if you're a health organization, maybe it's, using that to continue to boost the support of you, that you are a significant employer for the region there. We also know that the region is growing. The region increased 22% in revenue over the last 3 years and 41% in assets, as we looked at earlier. So of the 33 sectors in the state of Florida, the different industries in the state of Florida that report wage and employment data, nonprofits rank 16th out of 33 in average wages and 21st in the number of employees. We make up about 5% of the total workforce across the state, which puts us on par with both the manufacturing industry and the construction industry. So once again, let's think about what the story could be here. It could be room for growth, right? We're kind of middle of the pack at the average wages that we provide. So maybe the story is that we need to figure out how to increase what we are paying our nonprofit employees. Or we could go from the side of strength. I don't think you would find very many people in our state that would say the manufacturing sector doesn't matter to the economy, or that construction doesn't matter to the economy. So we shouldn't allow people to say that nonprofits don't matter to the economy, right? We're on par with them. I think manufacturing is just below us. Construction is just above us. So if they are important, we are important too. And we have the data to back that up. When we look at regional data unemployment, it does show that the urban areas offer more job opportunities. That's probably not a shocker to anyone. That happens across any industry. Also tend to have higher wages and greater access to a larger labor market and social supports. The rural regions of the state are more likely to have limited employment opportunities, lower wages, and minimal access to social services. So here, once again, we're looking at that 8-county region of Tampa Bay, had the second highest number of nonprofit employees after the Southeast region, and the fourth highest wages, both hourly and annual, when we take a look at that. When we look at the 5-county area, so we're leaving out Manatee, Sarasota, and Citrus and just focusing on the 5 counties that are probably more common to most of you, the annual average wage is $56,324. And the average hourly wage is $26.99. That high number is probably also driven by the number of healthcare jobs that exist in your particular area. So if your wages are significantly lower than this, keep that in mind. And it might be a data point that you could use with your boards or other decision makers to talk about pay equity across the sector. How do we make ourselves more competitive with the healthcare nonprofits to be able to recruit employees, to be able to kind of combat the workforce shortage that we're seeing across the country. So although we have really great news about the positive effect of nonprofits on the economy, we also took a look for the first time this year at what the need was in our state. And some of you may use numbers like this already for your organization, but here, hopefully we get kind of that global picture of how you fit into what's happening across the state and in your region. So for the first time, we have overlaid the data on poverty rates, the households that fall below the federal poverty threshold, or that are classified as asset limited, income constrained, employed individuals. That's otherwise known as ALICE. The United Way came up with this acronym several years ago to help count the people who are above the federal poverty level, but still struggle to afford the basic cost of living. This ALICE threshold takes into account the actual cost of essential household expenses and whether people are able to afford those in those areas. So according to this latest income study by United for ALICE, 45% of Florida households currently find themselves below either the ALICE threshold or the federal poverty line. That is compared to 29% nationally. So Florida struggles significantly more than the nation overall, and households who are not able to afford their essential household expenses. In your 5-county area, you can see the percentage of household living below the ALICE threshold on the chart in front of you. So between 45 and 50% of households in your area cannot meet their essential household expenses, which means that not only are you providing economic benefit to the community, but you're also providing essential services, vitally important support, not just to the quality of life to these and all households, but also being able to directly affect their ability to contribute to the economy. So hopefully, this helps. If you haven't been able to see the data in this way, this gives you a little bit better picture of what this might look like at your county level. And would love for you all to share in the chat. If you have other data points that help tell the story of the need in your community, would love for you to share that with your colleagues that are on the call today. And we can use that as a little bit of a resource as well. So feel free to drop those in there. So compounding on that, we also know that Florida's nonprofit sector, although strong and important to the economy, doing fantastic work, that we actually rank fairly low compared to the other 49 states in our country and Washington, D.C. So we are 46th lowest in income generated per household out of the 51 areas, 48th lowest for revenue per household, and 48th lowest for number of nonprofits per household. If you look at just the numbers of income and revenue, we're quite high because we have a lot of people in our state. But when we take a look per household, we drop down to actually not having as much support for the individual households that are in our state as we would like. We are also our hourly wages, which for Florida, it's about $22 for the 5-county area, about $27. That's below living wage for one adult and one child in Florida. That information comes from the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. They do a living wage calculation for every county in the country. So they consider the living wage in Florida for one adult and one child to be $35.98. You can see that's quite a bit higher than the $22 that we have for the state overall. The 5 counties are about $9 per hour below the living wage. However, if we take a look at the county level, there's a significant difference, especially for Hernando. Hernando's hourly wage is $18.18, and the living wage for Hernando County is considered to be $34.76. So it's about almost half of what it should be to really be able to provide for a household with one adult and one child. All 5 counties are below, but Hernando was the most significant difference there. So here's another example of where the data might be a call to action. Although nonprofits are doing great work, important work in our communities, we're bolstering the economy. We also know that we are not doing a very good job in supporting the people who are providing those services for our state. And we also are probably short on the amount of program and services that we're able to provide because we are lower in number of nonprofits and income generated per household. So quick look at some of the data. Hopefully you're not too overwhelmed with numbers. And if you do have any questions, please continue to drop those into the chat. We'll take a look at those in just a minute. But I also wanted to share a little bit, some of the excerpts from our Strength in Numbers Practical Action Guide to continue to help you understand how to use this data and interpret it for your organization. So I'm going to give you some examples. This Practical Action Guide was designed for you as nonprofit leaders to help you use this economic impact data and the report as you achieve your mission, as you're working within your interconnected network. Because when we understand the contribution of the nonprofit sector, both generally, across the board, and then also with specific focus on your region, your work, your organization, you do have those data and stories to tell funders, to tell policymakers, community leaders, other people that are important to the success of your organization. So we are going to take a look at how that works. The primary tool that you're probably going to use to be able to interpret the data for your organization is through the data dashboard. So if you go to our website to the economic impact report, you can get to that from the main page. There's also sort of like a sub menu that drops down for the data dashboard. There's 7 tabs to it, so lots of information there. You'll automatically be taken to the overview tab, which is a high level understanding of the number of nonprofits. It defaults to the state, but as you see on the right-hand side, you can change that to a particular region, a particular county, or multiple counties if you want to take a look at that. That will tell you number of people employed, revenue generated, wages distributed by those nonprofits. The second tab is the social function tab. So we took a look at some of this information earlier. This helps us describe the needs that we are filling across a variety of social functions: healthcare, environmental, international, arts, culture, and the humanities. Whatever your category is, you'll be able to kind of take a look at your slice of the sector. So it allows users, you or outside people, to shift perspectives and gain a deeper understanding of how nonprofits in a particular area serve those functions. The social function snapshot tab, which is right next to it, allows you to see metrics associated with that specific sector. So the information about, revenue, employment, wages, et cetera, by that particular subsector. If you are looking for a quick understanding of nonprofits serving in a specific area, the county snapshot tab is the way to go. This gives you, a really quick, almost like infographic on what a particular county or multiple counties look like. So you can use that, print it out, send the link to people that you want to know about it. And once again, we're talking about employment data, average annual salary, average hourly wages for that particular area. The next tab is a nonprofit directory. So you can see by name the nonprofits that are included in our report. It can be sorted by county, by region, by social function, by zip code. You can really kind of drill down and see exactly who is in your area and who is a part of this data here. And then we have the demonstrating needs tab, which is where the ALICE and federal poverty data is. And then finally, the national comparisons tab. So you can see where Florida falls and all the other states as well. So a lot of information there. On each tab of the dashboard, you can select a specific state, county, region, or social sector by clicking on the menus on the right-hand side and choosing what you would like from the drop-down menu. So when it's filtered by one of those variables, only the data associated with that one will be visible. It is a little bit hard to maneuver from mobile devices. So if you're going to spend some time kind of poking around, we do recommend using a computer screen rather than trying to do it on your phone. It'll be a little bit wonkier, a little bit hard to see all the information there. So the first chapter in the practical action guide is strong organization. So relevant for all nonprofit staff and board members, because it provides you the opportunity to build some core skills in how you tell the story of your organization, or gives you some additional data to further increase the effectiveness of the stories that you're already telling. So here's an example. This one is from Brevard County. So if we were looking at the dashboard, we would see there's 515 nonprofit organizations in Brevard. The average revenue for arts organizations in the county is $580,000. And we can look at employment for the arts organizations in the county and see it's 0.5%. If we take out the public benefit organizations, the foundations, it increases to 1.4% of the employment within the sector. So we can extrapolate from that data that the arts nonprofits are trying to accomplish quite a bit in the county with hardly any staff. And then we can kind of continue to tell that story from there. So what would that story look like? So maybe it's with 34 arts organizations in the county. We know that average revenue is $580,000. But at my arts organization, we're only at $428,000 of annual revenue. Maybe that's important information to share during my strategic planning that the board is going through to say, how can we grow to meet the average or go beyond it? Or maybe it's to share with local elected officials if they're doing budget appropriations, or an art council is trying to figure out how to distribute grant money. We have data to show that our organization is not at the midpoint for organizations within the county. Or the story could be taking a look at the human services organization, right? 120 of the 500 organizations in Brevard County are human services. 23% of the nonprofits, but only 11% of the workforce, which suggests that a lot of work in the human services sector is being done by volunteers. I mean, once again, for us, that's kind of like, yeah, right, I know that. But now we have the numbers to be able to prove that to people, that significant amount of work is being done by volunteers within the sector. And we also know from Florida Nonprofit Alliance's research on the state of the sector that volunteering remains down since the pandemic. It has not recovered to numbers in the volunteering in pre-pandemic levels. So that's contributing to limitations and burnout that we're seeing within the sector. That message could be really important for funders if you're looking for additional support. Either hiring new staff or supporting existing staff, could be for board members. It could be great to share with corporations that have volunteering programs. There's this huge need for volunteers to make sure human services are being able to be performed in the community. Your marketing team, lots of different ways that we could use this story to bolster what our organization receives and also to share the challenges that we're having. So once you've reflected on that key information and ways to integrate it into the story of your organization, we hope that you'll make time to practice updating your stories or telling them in different ways. You can do that at staff meetings, at board meetings, and hopefully this might spark some discussion as well. Like what stories that you're already telling could be strengthened by using the data that's now maybe more readily available to you, right? So hopefully it's something that you can kind of reflect on and maybe have some conversation at your organization about. The next chapter gets into connected organizations. So how we work together, either across the county, across the region, across subsector areas. We all know that we are effective and sustainable. We also know that we're often more effective and more sustainable when we partner to other organizations. Once again, this is not really like a how to do this, because I know probably all of you have multiple ways that you already network and collaborate with nonprofits in your region. This is how we continue to tell that story to others, right? So how do we talk about coalitions advocating for shared interests? How do we talk about the collaborations that allow you to share work or get your programs out to more people? Or how do we talk about the networks of nonprofits building their capacity together? So thinking about this and how the data from the economic impact report might help you. Here's an example from a smaller county. This comes from Bradford County, which is in north central Florida, but could work for any of the smaller counties in your region as well. If I'm the Bradford County Food Bank, which is a made-up organization, and we want to make sure everyone has access to food, that means it's in our best interest to get to know nonprofits working in that same space. So if we go to the nonprofit directory, we can see the 11 nonprofits that are focused on education, health, and human services. And we can reach out and connect with people that maybe we're not working with already. Maybe we want to call a meeting where we get to know each other, start building trust, share challenges and resources that we're using, and allows the sector to continue to be stronger. Or maybe you're already doing that work, you have an existing coalition, and you want to make sure everyone knows about the work that you're doing. This could be a way to identify additional organizations. From the large county example, this one is from Sarasota County. It allows you to find organizations that are either close to you geographically or ones that have similar mission or both. So here we're looking at the fictional Early Childhood Education Center based in Sarasota. We sort the directory by county, so pull up Sarasota, and then by social function, education. That gives us 82 organizations. And then we can either alpha sort by city or zip code to find those that are closest to us if we want partners within the neighborhood. So here we're looking at those that are in the 34236 zip code area. The data won't be perfect. You'll still have to do some legwork to figure out, who the most relevant organizations to your work are, but hopefully it cuts out some of the work of trying to find organizations that are doing similar things. And then the last chapter in the practical action guide is powerful organizations. What happens when the sector works together? So here we're actually using Hillsborough as our example for ways that this information can help you grow the sector's power, especially in the public policy realm. We know that nonprofits leverage their power by building relationships with policymakers. And we also are subject matter experts in a lot of the issues that government is focusing on and trying to solve, either at the local level, the county level, state level, federal level. So this allows you to maybe share your expertise and your knowledge with policymakers in a slightly different way. So some examples on your screen right now. If the county of Hillsborough is struggling with how to adapt their tax policy, for example, we can share that 48,000 people in our county depend on nonprofit jobs. So nonprofit-friendly tax policies are really important to ensuring that nonprofits can continue to employ those people and pay the average wage of $64,000, right? So we have kind of the data to back it up. If we have elected officials, once again, these are all made up examples, but trying to go rogue and make decisions that might harm the sector, we have some information to share with them. Maybe it's on budget and spending, right? We're talking about human services investment from the government into organizations. 363 nonprofits ensure people in our county have access to basic needs. We're leveraging volunteer hours and financial contributions to contribute to the $1.4 billion in total revenue needed within the system. And so government funding is vital to be sure that those organizations are able to continue to do the work to support the residents in Hillsborough County. So a couple of examples of how that might work. When we're talking to government about public policy, this data also could be really helpful. So once again, would love to know if any of you are in the public policy space right now or doing some advocacy or lobbying work, if there are any goals that you have that your organization could benefit from having some data to support it, would love to know that in the chat as well. And FNA would be happy to help you kind of interpret that and go forward from there. All right, so we're going to turn to questions in just a minute. But just as a reminder, I wanted to share again the components of the economic impact report. We have the full report, which is available on our website with the key messages inside and even more data than what I shared today. It can get a little overwhelming just to have numbers coming at you in a webinar format. So check that out if you'd like to see what other data is available, or if you just really love research and numbers like I do. It's really interesting to kind of see what's there. You also have the data dashboard, which we walked through today, but take a look at that and use the filters to really make it as useful as possible for you. Updated infographic, which you have a little snapshot on your screen. It's actually 2 pages. It talks about the whole state, but it can still be very useful for you all, especially if you're trying to get the message out about the strength of the sector and how that adds to the economy, because both Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, and Pinellas County show very well for that. You're a strong contributor to the success of the Florida economy. And then the actual strength in numbers, practical action guide, which I do think is really great, probably a little biased, but it's a really nice tool to kind of walk through, like I said, with your staff, with your board, do some of these activities, use those examples to interpret the data for your own areas. And hopefully that will really help you tell stories, get attention, talk about your impact, and also describe the challenges that you're having. So we're happy to share these slides with you, but also remember that probably the most useful thing is actually going to the data dashboard and making it as specific as you can to what it is that you need. If you have any questions on how to do that, I'll share my contact information in just a few minutes. But you've seen a little bit about the Tampa Bay region, you've seen the 5-county example, and then we've done a few like individual county examples, but you can continue to customize that to get exactly what you need. Great. So with that, I will stop and take some questions. Karina, I don't know if any came in as I was talking.
We did get a couple, so let me share the 2 that came in earlier from Donna. One is regarding income, and the question is the average income for employees reported for the 5 counties or each of the 5 counties we work with? This could help with HR discussions and new salaries.
So the average annual wages and average hourly wages, is that what the question's about?
Donna, could you perhaps clarify in the chat because I was a little confused by that question as well. What exactly you're looking for with that one? The next question I think is a little bit more clear. It's about the different types of nonprofits and asking, can you find out where animal welfare, rescue, zoos fit in an environmental or public societal benefit?
Yes, I believe environment and animals is the category together, but we can double check by looking in the nonprofit directory. If you select that societal benefit, you should be able to see if the animal rescue organizations are listed there, but I'm like 99% sure that that's where they are.
you, Leah. There's another question we have from Matt, and I'm not sure what this is referring to, so you may need to clarify, Matt. What time period was used to calculate these numbers?
That's a great question. So most of the data is from either the fourth quarter of 2022 or the first quarter of 2023. And if you go to the data dashboard, it actually tells you by source what quarter the data was pulled. So you can see, you know, from the master file, what date that was, from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity when that came in.
Okay. We do have one question that came in when folks were registering, but anybody else, we have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to add them to the chat box. So the question that came in when Courtney registered was that Courtney is curious to learn about how to quantify how social enterprise programs positively impact the community in which they exist. I suppose using the data that you have presented.
Yeah, so we didn't, the social enterprise category is not one that the IRS tracks separately. It's kind of integrated into probably all the different societal benefit categories that we have. But that doesn't mean that you can't talk about for your organization how that continues to uplift your mission and allows you to contribute different types of revenue into the community. If that's kind of the story that you're looking for, is like, what's the economic impact? You know, I think that is, you know, how that contributes to the revenue, how that contributes to the assets that might be held there, how that contributes to employing people, and also that piece around, you know, like collaboration, networking, creativity, you know, like how we're solving issues by using that. That all counts. I don't think we have any specific data points on that, but I think it absolutely should be part of your messaging if that's something that you're doing successfully.
Thank you, Leah. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box for now. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share about, Leah, while we have some additional time?
Well, in case that first question was about wages, because I think income and wages sometimes, you know, you can use terms interchangeably, but yes, we have the wages information by county and then also by county and mission area. So like I said, I think, you know, especially for your region, healthcare is probably driving that. The numbers might look a little high to you, like, wow, I'm not making that much. So you can actually, you know, either take out health or look just at your subsector to be able to tell the story specifically about what your level is now. And then I do encourage you to take a look at the MIT research on what livable wages are for your area, or the ALICE data and federal poverty level data too, because nonprofit employees actually often fall into that ALICE area, that you know, the asset limited, income constrained, employed category. We have jobs, but we're not making living wages. And so it's not just about people that we're serving, but it's also making sure that the sector itself is doing right by our employees and paying them living wages as well. So if you need to have that conversation at your board level, you know, at the coalition level, at the government level, whoever it is that needs to hear that message, those numbers hopefully will be able to tell that story in a very concrete way.
Great, thank you. Another question from Haley asking, where does food banking fall on the list? Human service, perhaps?
Yes, yeah, human services.
Great.
Yep. Great question. Yeah, we're just a little limited in how detailed we can get in those categories because we are using the IRS master file, which is how they are categorized, you know, by the filing of 990s. So it's not quite as detailed as probably a lot of us would like, but it does give you an idea of what that looks like across the sector.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, looks like that's all of the questions we have. So if there's nothing further to share, Leah, Charlie, if you don't have anything else that you'd like to check in on, then it looks like we've got some found time, everybody.
Great. Thank you. I'll just put my email on the screen if you have any other questions or you need some help in figuring out how to use this for yourself. Please do feel free to reach out. We're happy to help in any way. And appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
All right, so a big thank you to Leah McDermott for sharing this incredibly informative and thoughtful presentation. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. Again, we'll be sharing the recording and slide deck in the next couple of days on our website, and we'll send everybody that registered an email to let you know when we've posted that. And please do reach out to us if you have any questions, and keep your eyes out for upcoming webinars. Have a great afternoon, everybody.